Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ambassador of Southern Rock. I'm your host, Michael Buffalo Smith, publisher and editor of Kudzu Magazine, author of books and all sorts of other stuff. And, I wanted to say, first and foremost, that we, first of all, let me just welcome back to the program again, my friend, um, an official attorney, Richard Smith. You got to respect anybody that goes through school long enough to become an attorney. I don't know. I barely even made it through, to get a theater degree.
Yeah.
But
I must love torture, I guess.
you
Love
must
those
love
bar
torture. Well,
exams.
yeah. Not only that, then once you get the degree, you set yourself up for a lifetime of going into a room full of people dressed in a suit and tie and getting yelled at by people. So it's kind of like, I didn't do that. I never did that. Well, okay. Anyway,
The only one that can yell at me is the judge, and I'll
yeah.
accept that. Everybody else, I won't accept.
I haven't. I've yet to see a judge that yells. So, I mean, the TV judges used to. Judge Judy. I used to love to
Yeah.
watch her because she would just get right on people's cases.
I had a judge one time tell me that if I made that objection one more time, that he was going to hold me in contempt. So I
Oh,
just said, why don't we just make it a continuing objection? He said, that's fine.
a continuing objection. I object to the other guys totally. Um, so, folks, what we're gonna you may notice by my background. First of all, first of all, please subscribe to the Ambassador of Southern Rock channel. We're getting more subscribers every day, and we really, really, really want more and more and more. Please help spread the word, Thunderbird, because we have lots of stuff coming up. And as you can tell by this particular episode, it's not all Southern Rock. We do Southern Rock, but we also like to cover all good music. And because Richard's of a little bit different time frame than I am, his formative high school and college years fell in the 80s, whereas mine was in the 70s. But that being said, yeah, I graduated high school in 76, but I went to college in the 80s. So we were listening to lots of lots. I start to say AM. I think we'd gone to FM by then. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it
I
was
can't
FM
remember.
by then.
Yeah, because I just remember. I remember what I didn't like. I wasn't crazy about Madonna and stuff. I did like Cyndi Lauper, and I liked a lot of Michael Jackson's stuff, and just all lots of that stuff. But I'm more of a rock and roll guy, as you may see by I'm going to say that my list is the most varied list that you may, other than Richard's,
Mhm.
you may ever see. And what we're doing, Richard had this idea of doing eight. We're going to each do eight because this eight for the 80s sounds like something you'd hear on the radio, doesn't it? The
Right.
80s at eight, or eight for the 80s. And so, anyway, that being said, we're going to we're going to start with Richard. He's going to name one, and I'm going to name one. We're going down the list. And first of all, I did want to, well, not first of all, about fourth of all now, right? I wanted to say, please also comment. We love getting comments, and we've been getting comments from people under the video. You can just go in there and comment whether you agree, disagree, or whatever. And I also wanted to remind you that neither one of us knows what's on the other guy's list at all. At all. No idea. So there is that reactionary element that people like so much,
Mhm.
except for we're not just reacting, we're reacting because we're like, what? You mean you really want to put that on your list? No, I'm just kidding. I think I'd probably like about everything that Richard likes, and he probably likes about 50% of what I like. So there you go. Richard, go ahead with your first one, bud.
Okay, this band is very much an 80s band, and I'm trying to be a little bit more diverse this time. Not picking just my favorite artist who happens to cross over from the 70s to the 80s or any of that kind of thing. I'm trying to pick something that was really 80s based. And this band, um, very unusual sound. I guess you could call it new wave. Big when I was in college, when I was in a fraternity. We did a lot of dancing to this band, even though it's not really dance music, kind of the jump dancing type music we did in the 80s. And unfortunately, one of them, but actually both of the lead singers have now passed away. First lead singer died much earlier of cancer, unfortunately. And then the other lead singer just recently passed away. But it wouldn't be the 80s without the Cars. So my number 8 is the Cars, Heartbeat City from 1984.
Wow.
We have the great song Drive.
Oh, yes.
You Might Think, and Magic. And we had the great video from MTV with the You Might Think video where the lead singer, Rick Ocasek, met his wife in the filming of that video.
Paulette.
Yeah, Paulette.
Oh, she was so beautiful.
Absolutely. So,
and I was like, how in the world did Rick Ocasek get her?
Yeah, I think fame and fortune goes a long way.
Especially that fortune part.
Right. So what do you think about the Cars?
I think that's a great album because I think, man, you kind of surprised me. Not that you picked something outstanding like you did, but that I didn't even think about the Cars myself. And going back to like I said, going back to Spartanburg Methodist College and USC Spartanburg, I listened to the Cars a good bit. And when Greg Erie and I were first getting together, and we're going to get a band, one of the first 2 or 3 songs that we learned to play together was Drive by the Cars. Who's going to tell you when it's too late? And that was, what was that guy's name that sang that? A keyboard player. It was so good. They had 3 singers.
Yeah, they had 2 main singers. They had the bass player and Rick Ocasek was kind of the rhythm guitar player. And the bass player, he sounded very much like Rick Ocasek. You couldn't really tell them apart.
Yeah.
But he's the one that passed away sooner. He died of cancer, fairly.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, they actually did have a third guy that sang too. But I just happen to know that because I wrote a paper about them. But yeah. The Cars is Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees, the Cars, man. Yeah. Well, in keeping with, I guess you would call, they were kind of new wave at first. And then they were kind of mainstream. They had their own unique sound. I mean, really unique. Other than Drive, the rest of them had that, I don't even know how you would describe that rhythm. And when you mentioned dancing to them, you created a real image in my mind that I really didn't want of you dancing. I don't know.
Well, I was a lot younger back then, but
yeah, I was never a dancer. Never a dancer or a romancer. Well, I was a romancer. I'm a Capricorn and she's a Cancer. Oh, it's not the 70s.
You're going back to the 70s again there, bro.
Yeah. My first one is New Wave all the way, 1982. I had been a fan of this guy. He's British. And I'd been a fan of his for several years. And I remember when he put out an album out called Get Happy that was every song on it was less than 2 minutes long. It's wonderful. Talking about Elvis Costello, the album Imperial Bedroom in 1982 was one of the 3 or 4 primary albums that we played at the dorm at Hammond Hall at Spartanburg Methodist College. There was a song on there called Man Out of Time. It's just, it's infectious. And another great song called Human Hands. And he had a song on there called Almost Blue that was kind of a country song, not to be confused with the album that he did called Almost Blue that did not have the song Almost Blue on it. Well, yeah, go figure. One of the little tidbits about that was interesting though is it was produced by Jeff Hansen. And Jeff Hansen, of course, most famous for engineering all the Beatles albums with George Martin. So there's 15 great songs on Imperial Bedroom, Elvis Costello. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. I'm not even going to phone a friend.
Well, when I think of Elvis Costello, I think about their names, and I can't, you couldn't put two names together that would be more confusing to me with Elvis and Lou Costello from Abbott and Costello.
Which is
Those two names
exactly how I got
together.
his name, yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I always swore I would never mention this name on a podcast, but Marilyn Manson is a kind of a that's even one even weirder name and one even weirder dude.
Yeah.
But
Well, my wife
anyway,
is a major, my wife's a major fan of his wife, who's a great jazz pianist and singer, Diana
oh,
Krall.
Elvis Costello. Yeah,
Yes.
I started saying Marilyn Manson's wife.
No, Elvis Costello's wife.
Yeah, Diana Krall. She's got a wonderful Christmas album out. Oh God, well at least one. The one that I've got is really good. All right, well who's your next one?
Okay, the next one. Now, in my opinion, you cannot say the 80s without this particular artist. This artist is known for the 80s, and he's been rediscovered recently on YouTube with YouTube reaction videos. We have a lot of people that are hearing his music for the first time, and they are just going crazy about him. Some songs he had from back in the 80s are now, charting and showing up on the different Spotify and different platforms. And this is not an album by him. He's a huge solo artist and a member of a major rock and roll group. So
Hmm.
I want to pick something from Phil Collins, but rather than pick one of Phil Collins' solo albums, I think it was his last album with Genesis, one of their best ones, I think, Genesis Invisible Touch from 1986.
Yeah.
I love Throwing It All Away, Land of Confusion. Into Deep is a great song. I'm a huge fan of that song. And Tonight, Tonight, Tonight. So um, Phil Collins, who had some great success as a solo artist, he was also uh, the second lead singer of Genesis, and I love his work with Genesis, and those are some of my favorite songs of his. So I picked the Genesis album instead of Phil Collins, but you can't say the 80s without Phil Collins.
I can. The 80's without Phil Collins. See, I did it. When I think about Phil Collins, I think about Live Aid. And he was the only artist that played both the United States and England the same day and flew between the two shows, played on the stage, and then flew all the way across transatlantic to play on the other stage, which was cool. But the that album that you mentioned, one of my favorite Genesis songs is "Land of Confusion." I just and I think that that could be the theme song right now for the United States. And of course, I thought when you first said Phil Collins, I was like, "Oh boy, here it comes, coming in. I could feel it coming in the air tonight. I could just sense it." And that's why you threw me a curve. You threw me a curveball. I love it when you do that. Thank you. Keep doing that. My next one is one of my favorite artists of all time who recently passed away, sadly passed away. One of the greatest songwriters, entertainers by the name of Tom Petty. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, 1985, Southern Accents. Yet another one that takes me back to my college days. Uh, the title track, Southern Accents, a beautiful piano song, was also covered with major class by Johnny Cash on some of his final Rick Rubin produced recordings. And he did a great job, but there's nothing like the original. I remember when Southern Accents came out again, and going back to Greg Erie and when we were first putting our band together, that album was out. So we also learned to play that song Rebels from the album. I was born a rebel uh, on a Sunday morning. That album had Rebels, but it also had that Don't Come Around Here No More, which was one of the first really huge MTV Freakazoid videos. If you'll remember, it's kind of like a Alice in Wonderland Mad Hatter thing. There's a song that was not a hit on there, but it was a hit at our dorm, by golly. A funny song called Spike. That Tom, if you guys haven't heard Spike, look it up on Spotify, YouTube. You can get a song, you can hear a song anywhere now on the internet. I think that's pretty cool. You just type it in and find it. But it's a funny song about encounter with a biker, and it's just it still makes me laugh. But it's a great song, Spike. The album is Southern Accents by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, 1985. And moving right along, Richard Smith.
My favorite Tom Petty song is "I Won't Back Down." I love that one.
Oh yeah, it is. It's a good motto too.
Yeah, he has some great stuff. Most of I was going to put him in this list, but most of the stuff I found of his I really liked the most was in the late '70s. So that's it's hard to find. I would find all these things that are '79, think they were '80s, but they were just barely on the other side of it. So trying to be diverse.
My two favorite albums is the Southern Accents, and then the first solo album was in the '80s too when he did Wildflowers, which I just got. A friend of mine sent it to me all the way from England. The Wildflowers box set, which is 5 CDs of stuff that was recorded at the same time. It's like getting 5 brand new Tom Petty albums. They're so good. Okay, end of commercial. Go ahead.
Well, Tom Petty is on this album that I'm talking about next, but it's not a Tom Petty album.
Oh, Bilberries.
I wanted to, I thought about that one, but that's not what I did. I was going to do that one. But this one, I wanted to be a little bit diverse, this group, and not just put a bunch of old white guys. I want to put a lady on this list, a lady that I was completely in love with in the 70s and in the 80s, and she still looks good today, but her voice was wonderful. She's a fantastic artist. It's her first solo album. It's Stevie Nicks, Belladonna, 1981. That's my next selection. I loved Edge of 17, the great guitar riff that starts that song. Of course, she did a duet with Henley, with Leather and Lace.
Yeah. Well, I am one with Tom Petty. Stop dragging my heart around.
Yeah. So he's on the album.
And Don Henley's at Leather and Lace.
Yeah, Don Henley.
Oh my gosh, that's a great. That album almost made my list, man. It came this close. We must think more alike than I thought. That's kind of scary.
And the song Leather and Lace was about some of your favorite artists. I think it was about Waylon Jennings and his wife.
Jesse Coulter.
Yeah. I think
I had no idea.
Him. Yeah. Leather and Lace is about those two.
I used to sit around and play that song and do both parts, but not for anybody, just for myself. I don't think that people would want to see that. Yeah, that's great, man. That's Belladonna is a great. I mean, she did 2 or 3 in a row there, but Belladonna being the first one is still my favorite. And like I say, I'm not a disco fan at all, but Edge of 17, if it plays on the radio, I turn that sucker up. I just love it. And I agree too that she could still sing just as well as she ever could. So there you go. My next one, it comes from I try to do these build-ups like you, but I can't do it as well as you. Where you like talk about them for 5 minutes before you ever tell who it is. This band had one guy in the band who had a major solo career, not unlike Phil Collins, but he had a major solo career. but the band as a whole in the early 80s ruled the airwaves. I believe when I saw them live, they had the #1 album in the country, and their opening act was Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, who had the #1 song in the country with I Love Rock and Roll. So I'm talking about the Police, and the album is called Synchronicity, 1983, their final studio album. I made a note here that, yes, I wore that cassette tape out right around in Mike Satterfield's Hot Rod, blasting the Synchronicity album. We had 2 tapes in there. We had that and Roslington Collins Band, and just played them over and over and over again. So anyway, Synchronicity, of course, gave us #1 song, Every Breath You Take, the #1 song, King of Pain, the #1 song, Wrapped Around Your Finger, the hit song Synchronicity 2, nominated for a total of 5 Grammy Awards and won 3. What an album. And I'm happy to say that, I just got a Jones for it, I guess, about 4 or 5 months ago. I was like, wait, I don't have Synchronicity. So I got on Amazon. I'm like, send me that thing now. Like some old angry old man. Send me that music from my childhood. But anyway, yeah. So Synchronicity by the Police. That's my next one. What's your next one? Or
Well,
wait, do you want to talk about the Police?
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
I know you like to talk about the Police because you're a lawyer.
Yeah, I wish I would have picked that one on my list because I love that. One of my favorite albums of theirs is, I think it's Ghost in the Machine or something. It's got those numbers on the front.
Yeah, that's it. What a great album.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite albums.
I haven't thought about that album in a long time.
I love the Police. And as a bass player, even though I'm kind of a beginning bass player, Sting is an incredible bass player, and the drummer is amazing for the Police, and they have a great chemistry back and forth. They do a lot of unique rhythms and bass riffs in their songs. And
a lot of it based on reggae and ska and all that kind of music, man. Golly, bomb.
And Sting is an incredible singer. I mean,
no kidding. Yeah. Wow.
And it's still, I tell you, if I want to look half as good as he does when I'm his age, because he's like 65.
Well, I'm sure you'll look half as good.
Yeah. And he is still in fantastic shape. He rides his bike everywhere. He does all these Pilates and stuff. And he's still, still looks about 10 or 15 years younger than he is. It's amazing, but fantastic artist. Great musician. I'm a big fan of his.
Well, now, if you had told me before we started that we'd be talking about how good looking Sting is, I would have said you're crazy. But yeah, he kind of is. He really is.
I aspire to be in his condition when I'm his age.
Yeah. I got to see the Police, like I said, up in Charlotte. But then in 1992, some of us from Edge Magazine ventured up to Charlotte to see Sting solo. When I say solo, I mean solo with about 20-piece band. And I had never seen anything better in my life. I mean, he was, and that show, he did that song Roxanne and did the entire thing a cappella. No musical instruments whatsoever. And you could have heard a pin drop. People were like, is that really his voice?
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Just that good.
Yeah. Well, I've had a real struggle when it comes to the next couple of albums because I changed my list 3 or 4 times because there's a couple I'm leaving out that I don't want to leave out, but I want to try to cover the entire 80s and be somewhat more diverse than I've been on my past selections. I went with an album that's probably one of the best albums from the artist who was a great artist in the 80s. Fantastic guitar player, whether you're really into his type of music or not. His musicianship is amazing. He played every instrument on his CDs and albums. Great producer of music as well. We just lost him a few years ago. It was very sad that happened. But my next selection is Prince, Purple Rain, 1984. The guitar solo on Purple Rain is amazing too. Even if you're, it's, I guess it's kind of borderline, whether this is a rock album or not, but certainly a lot of good guitar work in it.
Well, you're not going to believe this, but my next one is Purple Rain by Prince.
Oh, okay.
In,
Well, then you can do.
in order, in order. I mean, when you started, I was like, wait, that's my, wait, 1984, Purple Rain.
Well, the other one I was going to do, if you don't list it, I'll go back and mention it as my choice as well, because it was
Okay.
going to be, it's in the same category that I really wanted, but you might list it on one of your other selections, so I don't want to jump in now.
Well, the Purple Rain and Sign of the Times came right after that in the 80s, which was also good. But Purple Rain, what being a hit movie with a hit soundtrack album, and then the song Purple Rain, and then on top of that, if that wasn't enough, and don't you think it ought to be, it spawned top 10 hits when Doves Cry. That's the first time I ever saw Prince. I was in a motel room somewhere and saw a video of Prince in a bathtub with doves flying out of it, and he was singing that song. And I said, well, that's pretty creative. Also, Let's Go Crazy was a big hit off of that. Also, I Would Die for You was a pretty big hit off of that. Right. And dare we say, the adult themed song Darling Nikki, that was so controversial, you know, a few years before he passed away, he got back in touch with his religion, and he quit doing that song, Nikki. He quit doing anything that he thought was, you know, just, how should you say, not Christian or not right, which I admired him for that.
When you talk about things he did also, Buffalo, is he fused a lot of different kind of music in his music. You know, got a little bit of the R&B feel to it, and of course the guitar work, amazing rock guitar work.
Like a Jimi Hendrix kind of thing,
right? But he also included Latin music in his music, because he had Sheila E. playing drums, and she was amazing. And I think that is a big driving force in this album, is the great drumming of Sheila E. and all the Latin beat that she put in all the.
That whole band, by the way, the Revolution, that whole band, the bass player, everybody was just outstanding.
And I don't think his music ever was the same when Sheila E. left the band, because you lost that you know,
the Latino
Latin rhythm to his music that I think he really needed.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
okay, I guess I'm next then.
Yeah, go ahead, name another one of mine. Go ahead.
Well, this one, it should be in your list. I don't know if it is or not, because this is a band that most people think of is a band from the 90s, but they actually started in the 80s. And this is one of the greatest albums in the history of rock music. It is considered to be a masterpiece by most musicians who are into the harder rock music or metal music, if you want to call it. So the album is by one of the greatest metal bands of all time, Metallica, Master of Puppets, 1986, with I think it is one of, if not the best Metallica album. It is a fantastic album. The title track, Master of Puppets, is amazing. I also have Welcome Home Sanitarium, and of course the thrash metal hit Battery. Just a great album, introducing the double lead guitar slash metal sound of that started in the 80s, actually.
Yeah. Talking about Metallica reminds me of actually of the 90s or early 90s. We were doing Edge magazine in Greenville. There was a friend of mine up there, the late Gail Gray, who was a serious fan. She turned me on to the band Metallica, and the drummer Lars. And I really, man, I'll tell you what, they're really good. That's a band that you just have to listen to loud. There's no other way. I mean, you can't play. Could you turn up some Metallica kind of softly? No, you can't. Got to crank that stuff up, man. And Hatfield, I remember I used to laugh about the fact that he assumed a position every time he started to sing. He kind of like spread his feet apart and just stood there like he's getting ready to get hit by a tornado, but in fact he was unleashing the tornado. So yeah, Master of Puppets, all that kind of stuff is that's some great stuff. Really good, good, good one, good one.
If you go to YouTube and look up their I think it's 1991 Moscow concert footage, they
Yeah,
have like there's over 1 million people in the audience. It is amazing to
that's an
look at.
audience, boy.
Yeah.
That must be some kind of record. Um, well, I kind of ran into the same thing as you. I wanted to be more inclusive and all too because in 2021, that's the key thing to everything is to try to be more inclusive in everything. And I've been trying to work on that myself with with everything from music to movies to giving everything equal chance. There's still some things that I might not like to listen to, but then not much. I mean, I give everything a chance. I've got friends and even my kids that turned me on to some hip hop. I even like. I really don't like the ones that are just outright naughty, nasty. Nasty lyrics and stuff because that goes against my grain. But as far as rap and hip hop and all, I find some good stuff in that. I find I can still find some good in today's country music. And when I say today's country music, it's not really country; it's country pop. But there are some good ones out there. I mean, there's good in everything. So okay, now just give me a second while I climb down off of my soapbox. Um, yeah, okay. This next guy, I was gonna say he helped me through college, but he never took a test for me, so he didn't. But he did. His record really played an important part in my life, and I remember when he only had two names, and then he changed it to three names. John Cougar Mellencamp, and this album that came out in 1983 was called You can pronounce that any way you want to, or whatever. But either way you look at it, what I liked about him was the simplicity. You could play, I could play, even I wasn't even, I was just starting on guitar, but I could play every song on that album because they were all 3 chord songs. But what he did with those 3 chords, it was something else. Uh, Big, huge hits like Little Pink Houses, Crumbling Down, that I always called Tumbling Down, but it's Crumbling Down. Authority song, I fight authority, authority always wins.
That's a great song.
That's your theme song, isn't it? And there was one called Play Guitar. Play Guitar, yeah, yeah. Simple, simple songs, but uh, if I had, you hear people say it all the time. If I had $1 for every time I've sang a John Cougar song in shows, I'd have $2. No, I used to do Pink Houses, Crumbling Down, and Authority song all the time, all off the same album. And then later in the 80s, he did another album that I thought was kind of outstanding called Scarecrow,
Yeah, that's a
and
great
that
one.
whole Farm Aid thing, which was great. But John Cougar, Melonhead, I'm Mellencamp. I'm sorry. It's not Melonhead. He's not. John Cougar, Melonhead. What do you think about John, Richard?
Huge fan of his, and another artist that I wish I'd included in my list because the 80s was a very rich musical part of history. I mean, we had some great artists in the 80s, of course, the 70s and the 60s. I'm afraid as we get closer to modern times, we start losing out on some of the great artists. We get more bands that are just produced or manufactured by the actual record label. But we still had great solo artists, great bands that wrote their own music, wrote their own songs, played their own instruments in the 80s, and it was a very rich time with great music. And Mellencamp was an outstanding artist. He still is, and he needs to quit smoking, but he's he's got some bad emphysema, but he keeps on, and basically it's probably going to end up killing him. But great artist, great musician, and I like any artist that has a statement and a message in their lyrics, and he definitely does.
Yeah.
He tries to tell a story, and he stands up for what he believes in his music.
Well, the thing that bothers me about John is how he chomps bubblegum the whole time he's doing his show. And I keep thinking he's going to choke to death on the gum. I mean, he's just, but that's okay. Charlie Daniels did that too. He chewed gum, but
I have a funny story about John Mellencamp. I was in Columbia, and he was performing in Columbia, and is early on in his career. I didn't know he was at that time, I don't think. And I was in an elevator, and this guy comes running in the elevator, and he gets down real low. He's running from girls, I think, that are chasing him. I don't know what's going on. He's over at me, and this goes like this. And I said, I did that. So I rode the elevator with not knowing who he was. And later I met, I think that was John Cougar.
Yeah. That's funny. Celebrity encounters. I had one with him too at Fuddruckers down here in Spartanburg. Way 100 years ago. They had come off the somehow or another they ended up stopping. He wanted to go to Fuddruckers, so I guess they looked it up and drove off the highway and went, and they were in there, and it was just him and a few people, and nobody even knew who he was. And this was after the album I just talked about, so it was a big hit, but he wasn't like dressed up like a rock star or anything. He just had on a ball cap and t-shirt and all like that, and he was getting him a burger. And I looked at him, and he must be really good with that putting his finger up thing, because he kind of did that like he was like, please don't call attention to me. And I was like, it's all right, whatever.
That's pretty cool. Well, my next one is a band that is in my top 3 of all-time favorite bands. And they started, I think, even maybe in the 70s, but their biggest hits came in the 80s, and they are going strong ever since. They're still having hits every year. They still sell out stadiums and arenas. And one of the few bands that actually was in the 80s that's gone this far and still doing all that. Fantastic band from, I think it was Northern Ireland.
God almighty.
U2.
No.
The Joshua Tree from 1987, which I think is their masterpiece album.
Yeah. And it's my next one on my list.
Yeah. See?
How did you know them in order?
These are great masterpieces. So I knew they're going
to
be.
Yeah, but it's in order. I mean, I'm like, by golly, next time I'm going first, okay? It's just...
we can just talk together about them, and we can go on to the next one. So
1982, Joshua Tree.
1980.
Let's talk about hits, shall we? I still haven't found what I'm looking for. With or Without You, Where the Streets Have No Name, Bullet the Blue Sky. Produced by Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois, 2 genius producers. One of the most timeless, I would say. Somebody one time asked me, hey, Buffalo, other than Southern rock, they always start out with that. Other than Southern rock, what would you say was the definitive album of the 80s? And I said, well, it's got to be either Joshua Tree or Purple Rain. But don't make me pick, because then I would pick you too. I agree that they just, I mean, what an amazing band with an original sound. One guitar player, how Edge can play the stuff that he plays blows my ever-loving mind. There's everybody's seen, not everybody, but most people have seen Rattle and Hum, the documentary. Um, uh, there was another one that the guys on the podcast turned me on to, uh, called "It Might Get Loud." If you are a YouTube fan and you've not seen that, look up you "It Might Get Loud," because you'll see Edge spreading his wings and playing lead guitar like Jimi Hendrix. I mean, he could just do whatever. I mean, just pretty much anything. So anyway, Joshua Tree, yeah, I used to dream of seeing them in concert, but let's face it, they every tour was just so huge that even if you did score tickets, it cost you a bundle, and I never did get to go, so I just had to settle for home video, which is good. And yeah, and I think the first time I ever saw you too was when we all played hooky at Spartanburg Methodist. The first, the day that they did Live Aid, and we all stayed and watched it on TV all day long. And I saw that band U2 from Ireland, and they were just, what got me was when I learned that they had started out as a Christian band, and it still held on to the Christian ideals and beliefs, and
And
still
you
do.
can definitely tell that in the lyrics of their songs. I
Yeah,
mean,
brilliant. Yeah, it's like promoting the positive message without beating you over the head with it.
right.
I just love that. I mean, I absolutely love that. And
The song "One" is a perfect example of that. It's a tremendous, you know, Christian-based song, but doesn't come across that way. It's not considered Christian contemporary, but
when my
a
when
lot of
my
songs.
when my daughter was doing dance every year when she was little, I think she was probably 12. She did a ballet. Uh, well, there was like five of them dancing around on stage at Furman University, and they were playing that song "One." And I've got that somewhere on video, but it was breathtaking. Just breathtaking to see them. And they had on these flowing dresses, and they were doing the ballet. It was like the Bolshoi or something. But that song has always meant a lot to me too. So actually, I like two songs called One. No,
Yeah,
actually, I like three songs called One.
yeah, I do too. But my favorite song of theirs is actually "Stuck in a Moment," which is not on that album, but that song did a lot for me when I needed to hear it. I mean, their lyrics are very uplifting. Very, I mean, they're one of the greatest bands of all time. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah.
And I'll let you go next. That way, since I've taken your album a couple times, you get to go next.
All right. Well, this is one of my favorite a band with one of my favorite guitar players. No, it's not David Gilmour this time, uh, but it's one of my favorite guitar players. This album came out in 1985 and spawned just a bunch of top 10 hits. Um, the band is called Dire Straits, and it's Mark Knopfler is the guitar player, and of course, Brothers in Arms is the album, and the song Brothers in Arms remains one of my uh, songs that I say there are a few songs that can make a grown man cry, and that one can, because it's just the emotion of the song combined with the uh, Mark Knopfler can move you to tears with his sort of like David Gilmour, just that emotional guitar playing. I would give anything to be able to hit even one or two licks like those guys, but that's not meant to be. I'll just enjoy them instead. So anyway, Brothers in Arms, but also people will remember the top 10 hits from the album, The Walk of Life. She take the walk of life and was so far away from me, that's so far away. Uh, Man, yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. Now there's something bizarre going on here. I all my type was laying on top of each other. I couldn't see what was going on. Yeah. Anyway, Brothers in Arms. I think that I accidentally deleted whatever other notes I had on it, but that's enough. I've said enough about it anyway. All I
Money for
can
Nothing
say
for
is
the
it's a great record.
Money for Nothing on that album also.
Money for Nothing. That's what I had. Yeah, with
Yeah.
Sting singing on it.
Right.
The MTV song. People used to call up to the radio station where I worked. And, can you play that MTV song? And I'm like, oh, you mean Money for Nothing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that was definitely a great album. Great guitar player. He's well respected by a lot of people. I remember my cousin having that on vinyl, and we listened to play it on his turntable a lot. He would really crank it up. It's a great album. Okay, I did do what I said I was going to do. I didn't put a Kiss album in here and didn't put a Pink Floyd album because I put them on my last two lists, and they're about two of my favorite bands.
It'd be hard to find a good Kiss album in the 80s.
Well, there is one that I'll put them on my list of honorable mentions after we get done. One of their best albums, I think, was in
Studio.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But the next album we're going to talk about is by our good friend Tim Shook's favorite band, and one of my favorite bands. And this album was just a fantastic album. It's their best album, I think. Great tenor lead singer, great guitar player. It's Journey, Escape, 1981. Stone in Love, Who's Crying Now, Don't Stop Believing, Open Arms. All those hits from the 80s are all from this one album by Journey, Escape, and that's why it's so high on my list.
It's a great album, and I tell you, when you mentioned the guitar player Neil Schon, one of the greats, and I love the guy that's the current lead singer for Journey, but there's only one Steve Perry. Only one Steve Perry. I was just watching a video. A buddy of mine sent me some DVDs from Time Life of all these midnight special shows from the 70s and 80s. And I was watching one from the 80s that had Journey, the young Steve Perry. And I was just like sitting there going, wow, what a voice. Wow, what a voice. Did you say Open Arms is on that album or
yes,
not?
It is.
Golly, wow. That's a lot of hits. That thing must have been like quadruple platinum or something.
Yeah, it was great. It had, these are all like #1 hits too. They're huge.
Yeah, I remember that. I'll never forget that year. So Journey. All right, man. Well, okay, I'll move right on and name another one of mine. One of my musical heroes. I say that a lot, but I'm going to say it again. This album made the cut because it came out in 1980. It was almost the 70s, but no. 1980, when David Bowie put out the album Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, one of my favorite albums, had a song on there called Fashion. There's a brand new dance, but I don't know its name. And also he put out the single Ashes to Ashes, which was the sequel to Space Oddity. He talks about Major Tom, Ashes to Ashes, Funk to Funky. We know Major Tom's a junkie. And it was featured guest artist Robert Fripp, the great guitar player from King Crimson, is on there, and also a guitar player you may have heard of by the name of Pete Townsend played on that album as well. Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, David Bowie, 1980. I've got every album that Bowie ever did, and I still listen to him quite often. Okay, that's end of speech.
He was very innovative, very different style of musician, different types of material he did. Had a great voice too. I thought very underrated voice.
Oh yeah, really great.
He gets a lot of good feeling because of his stage show and everything that he did. As well, but mostly I like his voice. That's my favorite part of his singing. He's got a very good voice.
Me too.
We're down to my number one. So this is an album that I like it more and more as I listen to it over the years. It's one of the highest selling bands, one of the biggest albums of all time. Had multiple hits on it, and it was basically the first album produced after the tragic loss of their original lead singer, who had a very unique sounding voice. And to find somebody with almost the exact same voice
I
was
know it is now.
amazing to
I
be able
know
to
it
do. I
is.
know that Buffalo has guessed it now, and it is
Buzz Scott.
AC/DC Back in Black 1980. So it just barely got in there in 1980. But on that album, we got, of course, the title track, Back in Black. We got Hell's Bells,
Yeah.
Took Me All Night Long. It's
How
a
did they ever find
fantastic
somebody
album.
that sounded like Bon Scott? I still don't know. I've never read the story about how they ended up getting that guy. I mean, what they do? Audition. We need somebody who can scream on key. I mean, golly, he sounds almost exactly like Bon.
I can't tell the
Brian's
difference
his name, right?
myself.
Brian. Yeah.
Brian Scott, I think his name is.
Brian. Yeah. Bon Scott and Brian. Whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's right. It's Bon
We
Scott.
don't
It's
claim to be
Brian,
authorities, folks. We're just
Brian something
fans.
else. But fantastic. You know, I love Hell's Bells. I mean, you can't go to a football game and not hear Hell's Bells being played when they kick off. Usually, it's a great album, and
Such a powerful band,
it's
man.
one of the biggest selling albums of all time. I mean, it's right up there with the very top ones.
We went to see. We went to see. It must have been around. I don't know, early 2000s when ACDC came to Greenville to. I think they called it the Bilo Center then, and me and Jill went to that concert, and I got her a photo pass. I said, "Are you sure you want to get that close to the band to take pictures?" She's like, she's putting cigarette butts in her ears for. I said, "That's really not going to protect you that much." They let you take first three songs, but I looked at her down there, and she's right near the front of the stage. And when they cranked up, I could tell even from up in the balcony where I was sitting, I could tell that her head was about to explode. She stayed for one song and again made her way back. But they that was one of the most bombastic shows I ever seen. Um, Stage show and everything. And they did a whole lot of Rosie, and they had that gigantic oversized plus size. Is that the right way? Plus size woman balloon, like it's like huge. It like filled up half of the Bilo Center. Just huge thing. And then when we were doing, what was that for those about to rock? And they shot the cannons
Yeah, I remember that.
inside, and I'm like, okay, we didn't. None of us needed any hearing for the rest of our lives. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you on that. And I'm gonna move right along to my number one, who is probably one of my all-time favorite artists. No, it's not the Allman Brothers because this is not Southern rock, and it's also not Kate Bush, although I love Kate Bush and David Bowie. This album is a double album, and you talk about barely making the cut. It came out in 1980 as well, and had a couple of major hits. But every song on both albums was good. And I'm talking about Bruce Springsteen, The River. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. The top 10 hit, Everybody's Got a Hungry Heart. They did Sherry Darling, which was a just a garage band, great song. The Ties That Bind, Say Goodbye, It's Independence Day. Oh, it was a wonderful song. Cadillac Ranch was just a rock and roll thing, man. But I always say, I love Born to Run and all, but the album that really sold me for life on Bruce was when I bought that double album, The River. And what'd you think about Bruce?
Oh, I love Bruce. He's a great musician. Um, he's an amazing performer. I mean, I've heard when you go to his concerts, he just keeps playing and keeps playing. He goes like 3 hours straight or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
incredibly good energy, and still doing it at his age now. I mean, he still writes some great music, some fantastic lyrics. Again, I like artists that write meaningful lyrics, that talk about different subjects. He's one of those
Uh,
very top of the list of great entertainers
a
and
lot of
songs.
stuff about having fun and riding in cars.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's a little bit of that in there, but there's no problem with mixing up a little bit. But he can definitely write a song like Philadelphia too. I mean, he can
yeah,
write
that's right,
great,
right.
great
Well,
lyrics.
you mentioned earlier our common friend Tim Shook, and I love to give him a public shout out because it had always been my dream to see Springsteen in the E Street Band, and it was because of Tim Shook that I got to go to Greenville because wherever he was working at the time, they got him tickets in the private box. The private box. I mean, wow, wow! It was perfect vantage point. Plus, there was no crowd. Plus, they were coming around bringing you snacks and drinks and everything. It was supposed to be me and him, but unfortunately, a female stopped that in its tracks that he was married to at the time. And so I took my buddy Scott Green and we went. It would have been, I think Scott liked it okay. I think I wish that Tim could have seen it because it wasn't long after that that Clarence Clemens passed away.
Hmm.
So I got to see the big man, and I am forever indebted to Shooky. Shooky? I've never called him Shooky. Shooky, Shooky. All right. Well, I'm going to run down real quickly before you head into yours. My honorable mentions. I'm not going to talk about them. I'm just going to say I had a few bubbling under my list. Bubbling under my list, the Traveling Wilburys Volume One. What a wonderful album that just heavily impacted my life. How can you go wrong in a band that has George Harrison and Roy Orbison and Tom Petty and Bob Dylan and Jeff Lynne? Yeah, and not only that, but they were great songs too. Another one that I really enjoyed a lot back in college, and I'm kind of surprised you didn't mention the album 1984 by Van Halen. Um, yeah, what a ooh, wow. Yeah, that go ahead and jump. And yeah, I'll go ahead and say this, and then because I want people to comment, so y'all can go ahead and comment and tell me that I suck or whatever you want to. I preferred the Sammy Hagar version of Van Halen. Okay, I said it, but Diamond Dave really did a good job on several of those songs. Well, all the ones that he did, but they
So you
had more
prefer Van
hits with
Hagar to
Sammy
Van
Hagar.
Halen,
They
right?
had more hits with Sammy Hagar.
Yeah.
The Red Rocker Rocks. Also, 1980 album by a band you may have heard of called the Rolling Stones, Tattoo You. Start me up, I'll never stop, and how can you ever forget that? And another 1980 album that I remember with bittersweet memories because the release was after the guy was dead. It was John Lennon and Yoko Ono's Double Fantasy, 1980. Of course, it came by the time it came out, he had been murdered in cold blood. And for those of us who lived through that, we'll never forget it. Sort of like 9/11, same thing, or the COVID virus, or we've had a few things in our lifetime.
Yeah, I remember watching Monday Night Football. It was a Monday night. It was Monday Night Football, and
Yeah,
they broke into the game, and Howard Cosell had to make the announcement that
Howard Cosell,
John Lennon had been assassinated. So, you know,
a
but
member of the Rolling Stones.
he didn't say that, but, but it
No,
was terrible
Howard
thing.
used to make mistakes once in a while, though. He was fun. He was the sportscaster, man. Golly, that would do. I could do a whole show about Cosell memories. I
Yeah,
got
you pretty
one.
much got most of mine. Go ahead. You hitting on
Just
my,
one more.
hitting on mine.
One more. You were talking about Genesis. Give some love to Peter Gabriel, 1986 album called "So," Sledgehammer, Sledge, and Big Time. I'm on my way. I'm making it. And then that pretty song he did called "In Your Eyes."
Yeah, I remember the video for a Sledgehammer was one of those new
Sledge, claymation.
weird looking videos where they were doing time lapse photography or something. I
Yeah,
don't know.
It was claymation too. Clay animation. But yeah, that was a weird. That was like a. That's one time I was very thankful that I didn't take drugs, because I think it would have pushed me over the edge. I when the first time I saw that video, I felt like I was taking drugs. But yeah, Peter Gabriel. Who are your most honorable mentions?
Yeah, well, you hit most of them on your list, but one of them, which I'm surprised that you didn't mention either, I mentioned earlier, was Guns N' Roses' "Appetite for Destruction."
Oh God, yeah. I
Yeah,
thought that was 90's. That's
no,
80's.
that was the '80s. It was the '80s, and I was going to put it in, and I kept debating between that one and another one. So I was not a huge Guns N' Roses fan. I do like that album. I like some of their music, but over the years, not as big a fan of Axl Rose and some of his things he's done over the years. So,
Exploits.
but I do love that particular album. It was a one of the top selling albums. It's the number one debut album I think of all time.
It was.
So yeah, so it's a great album. White Snake. I had
Dave
them in and
Coverdale.
took them back out. Their first, their uh, album by the name of White Snake as well. I'm a big follower and fan of David Coverdale. I follow him on Twitter. He's hilarious. If you're on Twitter, follow him. He's great.
Oh yeah.
And that was a great album. It was really big in my college years. I think it was the '87 album or something in the '80s. That was one of my choices there. Also, Tears for Fears, their album, but the Big Chair or something like that had Shout and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. That was a huge big album in the 1980s. And I wanted to put in one more is Billy Joel's Glass Houses
Oh gosh,
album.
yes.
It was a big kind of turning point in his career. He had gotten to be kind of a balladeer with Piano Man and those very kind of a mellow rock persona. He got some criticism of that, got mad about it, and did his hardest album I think he ever did, Glass Houses, and had some great hits on it. I love a lot of the songs on that album.
It's
Still
still rock and roll to me.
For me is a big one on that one.
It's still rock and roll to me. What about Uptown Girl was on there? That he wrote about. Who was it? It was Christy Brinkley who was with.
Right.
Golly, what a great album that was. You mentioned Guns N' Roses, and because I'm just want people to jump all over me, I don't like Guns N' Roses and never did. And Slash is a pretty good guitar player. But as far as Axel goes, I don't know. Just his whole attitude always ticked me off. So there you go, folks. Go ahead, lay into me. I can take it. I can take it. If you agree or disagree, let us know. Please make comments below on the thingamajigger here. You can tell that I can't think clearly any longer. So at that point, I'm going to say, do you have any closing comments, Council?
I would just say everybody keep, if you mention any artist you've never heard of or haven't heard their music, go listen to it because it's a lot of good music and we left a lot of people out. I also had the Stones album Tattoo You on my list as well. We had several of the same albums. So we picked some of them even in the same order because there was some huge successful artists from the '80s. I did not put the bangles on. I wanted to because I was completely in love with Susanna Hoffs. She was
Weren't
amazing.
we all?
And the Go-Go's had a great album as well. So there was a lot of
Beauty and the
diverse
Beat.
interest, a lot of diverse music from the 80s. So it's not all.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here. Their albums are still running through my mind. I mean, look at, we may have to do. We may have to go back to the 80s at some point. Then I can use that graphic. I pulled a graphic off the computer it's done like the Back to the Future logo, but it says back to the 80s.
Yeah. I had about 20 albums on my list and had to cut them down to 8 and had some real disagreements, but you really can't leave out the top 3 or 4 we had. They were such big hits. I mean, you can't leave Back in Black out,
No, well, none of them really.
Yeah.
I would even say that Cars album,
Yeah.
major stuff, man. It's all good. I liked all of them. There you go. So
rocking.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, we'll catch you down the road, Richard. And thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you next time. Say bye, Richard.
Bye, Richard.
Making it back to Macon. Give me some grits, gravy, and bacon. Just a little something to tide me over. The Mama Louise and the H&H Open. She got fried chicken and pinto beans, hot cornbread, sweet iced tea. Everything that a body needs. That's why I'm making it back to Macon. Give me some grits, gravy, and bacon. Just a little something to hold